The rain had been falling since before dawn, steady and cold, the kind that turns sidewalks into mirrors and makes people walk faster, without knowing why. Jonathan Mercer watched it from the back seat of his car. At 52, Jonathan Mercer was known as a man who owned distances. Airlines, shipping routes, data cables beneath oceans. He could move anything anywhere except himself. The city slid past the tinted windows, gray and blurred, like something he no longer lived inside. His driver spoke once. "Sir, the board is waiting." Jonathan didn't answer. They stopped at a red light near an elementary school. The building was old, brick cracked by time, paint peeling around the windows. A banner hung crooked over the entrance, soaked through, letters bleeding blue. Enrollment drive. Support our future. Jonathan's phone vibrated in his hand. He turned it face down. Outside, a group of children huddled under the narrow awning. Too many for space. Some wore coats too thin for the weather. One boy had shoes held together with tape. A teacher stood with them, counting, her voice sharp from strain. The light stayed red. Jonathan's gaze fixed on a girl standing slightly apart. She couldn't have been more than 8. Small, hair pulled back too tight. Her backpack was soaked, darker at the bottom where water had seeped in. She held it against her chest like it was something alive. She wasn't crying. She was watching the street, watching cars pass, watching people not look back. Something in the way she stood made Jonathan uneasy. Too still, too practiced. The light turned green. The driver eased forward. "Stop," Jonathan said. The car halted halfway through the intersection. Horns sounded behind them. The driver twisted around, startled. "Sir." Jonathan opened the door. Cold rain hit his face immediately, sharp and real. He stepped out without his coat, shoes sinking into shallow water by the curb. The driver called his name, but Jonathan was already moving. The girl noticed him when he was a few steps away. Her eyes lifted. Dark, alert, not afraid. "Where's your school staff?" Jonathan asked. She glanced toward the door, then back at him. "Inside. They're busy. Why aren't you inside?" She hesitated, then shrugged. "I'm waiting." "For who?" "My mom." Jonathan looked again. The street was nearly empty. Just rain and traffic, and people who didn't stop. "She's late?" he asked. "She's not coming," the girl said quietly. Jonathan felt a strange pressure in his chest. "Then why are you waiting?" "Because if I leave, they call someone," she said. "And if they call someone, things get worse." The words were too careful, too adult. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked. "Lena." "How old are you, Lena?" 8. A shout came from the school door. "Lena, inside. Now." The teacher's voice was tight, exhausted, not unkind but stretched thin. Lena didn't move. Jonathan turned toward the door, then back to the girl. "Why don't you want to go inside?" She shifted her weight. Rain ran down her sleeves. "Because they'll ask questions, and I don't know the right answers." Jonathan straightened slowly. The city noise felt far away. "Where do you live?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "I'm not supposed to tell people." "Who told you that?" "Everyone." The teacher was closer now, frustration flashing across her face when she saw Jonathan. "Sir, you can't be here. She needs to come inside." Jonathan held up a hand, without looking away from Lena. "Is she in trouble?" The teacher sighed. "Her mother hasn't picked her up in 3 days. We followed protocol. There are limits." Lena's fingers tightened around her backpack straps. Jonathan felt something old and familiar rise in him. Not anger, control. "I'll take responsibility," he said. The teacher blinked. "You can't just—" "I can," Jonathan said calmly. "And I will." Silence settled between them, heavy as the rain. Lena looked up at him. "Are you sure?" Jonathan met her eyes. "No," he said, "but I'm here." She considered this, then nodded once. Behind them, the traffic backed up. His phone buzzed again, unanswered. Jonathan Mercer, the man who owned distances, stood soaking wet in front of failing school, holding the attention of an 8-year-old girl who had learned too early how systems break. And for the first time in years, he didn't know where the road ahead went. He only knew he wasn't getting back in the car yet. The school office smelled like damp coats and old paper. Jonathan sat in a chair meant for smaller bodies, knees angled awkwardly, water dripping from his sleeves onto the tile. Lena sat beside him, feet not touching the floor, backpack still clutched tight. Across the desk, the principal rubbed her temples. "Mr. Mercer," she said, checking the screen again, "your name isn't on any approved guardian list." "It will be," Jonathan replied. "That's not how this works." Jonathan leaned back slightly, then explained how it does. The principal exhaled. "A child is left without pickup. We document. We call. If there's no response, we escalate. Social services." Lena's shoulders stiffened at the last word. Jonathan noticed. "And escalation helps her how?" he asked. "It keeps her safe," the principal said automatically. Jonathan looked down at Lena. "Do you feel safe?" She didn't answer right away. "Safer than some places," she said finally. The principal frowned. "Lena." "It's okay," Jonathan said, his voice calm but firm. "She's answering honestly." Silence settled again. The principal glanced at the clock. "Her mother works nights. This isn't the first delay." "How many times?" Jonathan asked. The principal hesitated. "Enough that the teachers are worried." "Worried enough to fix it?" The principal's jaw tightened. "We're underfunded, understaffed, and over capacity. We do what we can." Jonathan nodded slowly. "So do I." He stood, towering slightly in the small office. "Here's what's going to happen. I'm taking Lena with me today. You'll log it. I'll sign whatever you need. If anyone asks, you say she left with a responsible adult. That's not." Jonathan slid a business card across the desk. The principal glanced at it, then froze. Her eyes lifted back to his face. Different now. "Careful. I'll expect a call," she said quietly. "You'll get one," Jonathan replied. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. Lena followed Jonathan down the steps, hesitant but steady. The black car waited at the curb, engine humming. The driver stepped out quickly, confusion written all over his face. "Sir." "Open the door," Jonathan said. Lena stopped walking. She stared at the car, the tinted windows, the polished metal, the man in the suit. "This isn't a police car," she said. "No," Jonathan replied. "It's just a car." She looked at him carefully. "Where are we going?" Jonathan paused. The honest answer rose first. "I don't know, but he didn't say that. Somewhere warm," he said. "Somewhere dry. Somewhere we can talk." Lena nodded once. She climbed into the back seat, sitting stiffly at first, then relaxing just enough to breathe. Jonathan followed, closing the door behind them. The city moved again. For several minutes, no one spoke. Lena watched the streets through glass, eyes sharp, cataloging exits, counting turns. Jonathan noticed the way her hands never stopped moving, fingers rubbing the fabric of her backpack strap like a habit built from long waiting. "Have you eaten today?" he asked. She shook her head. "Lunch is for kids who stay late." Jonathan didn't ask what that meant. He pulled out his phone, typed one message. "Cancel everything." Then he put away. They drove past a row of shelters, past a clinic with boarded windows, past a grocery store with a line that wrapped around the building. Lena noticed everything. "People wait a lot," she said suddenly. "Yes," Jonathan replied. "They get tired." "Yes." "They stop asking." Jonathan looked at her. "Did someone teach you that?" She shrugged. "You learn." The car slowed as they approached a tall building of glass and steel. Jonathan's building. Security moved quickly, umbrellas appearing, doors opening. Lena stared upward. "This is where you live?" she asked. "Yes." She frowned. "It's too big." Jonathan almost smiled. "I've thought that too." Inside, warmth wrapped around them. The lobby was quiet, polished, empty in the way expensive places often are. Lena's shoes squeaked softly on the marble. "No one else lives here?" she asked. "They do," Jonathan said. Just not together. The elevator doors closed. As they rose, Lena leaned her head back against the wall, eyes closing for a second longer than blinking. Jonathan watched her carefully. "Lena," he said. She opened her eyes. "I'm not your solution," he continued. "I don't know how long I can help, but for today, you're not alone." She studied him, searching for something in his face. Finally, she nodded. "Today is enough," she said. The elevator chimed. The doors opened onto silence. And somewhere deep inside Jonathan Mercer, something had sealed off for years shifted, uneasy, uncertain, and awake. Jonathan's apartment felt wrong with a child inside it. Too clean, too quiet, too controlled. Lena stood just inside the doorway. She was neatly aligned without being asked. She didn't explore, didn't touch anything. She waited the way people wait when they expect to be told to leave. "You can sit," Jonathan said. She chose the edge of the couch, feet tucked under herself, backpack still on. Jonathan removed his wet jacket and set it aside. The room smelled faintly of coffee and something chemical from cleaning products. No warmth, no life. "I'll get you something to eat," he said. Lena shook her head quickly. "It's okay. You said you hadn't eaten." "I can wait." Jonathan turned to face her. "You don't have to." She hesitated. "People say that. Then they get busy." Jonathan opened a refrigerator. It was stocked immaculate and used. Meals designed by someone else. Nutrition without comfort. He pulled out bread, soup, fruit. Simple things. Lena watched him the entire time. When he set the bowl in front of her, she stared at it like it might disappear. "You can eat," he said again, more gently. She picked up the spoon with careful hands. Took one small bite. Then another. Jonathan leaned against the counter, pretending not to watch. After a few minutes, she spoke. "You didn't ask my last name. You didn't offer it. People usually ask. I usually don't push." She nodded like she was filing that away. "Where is your mother?" Jonathan asked quietly. Lena's spoon paused midair. "She works," Lena said. "At night, and sometimes during the day, and sometimes not at all." Jonathan pressed. Lena lowered the spoon. "She gets tired." Jonathan waited. "She sleeps when she's supposed to pick me up," Lena continued. "Or she forgets. Or she can't come." "Why not?" Lena's voice grew smaller. "Because the bus costs money. Because her phone gets shut off. Because she says tomorrow will be better." Jonathan felt something tighten in his chest. "How long has this been happening?" he asked. Lena shrugged. "Long enough." Silence stretched. "You're very calm," Jonathan said. "I don't want to make trouble." "Why?" "Because trouble makes people disappear." The words landed heavier than they should have. Jonathan looked away, toward the window, the city far below. He knew that feeling, the unspoken rule. Don't need too much. Don't ask for more. "Lena," he said slowly, "has anyone ever asked what you need?" She thought about it. "No. What would you say if they did?" She frowned, genuinely unsure. "I don't know. I've never practiced." Jonathan pulled out a chair and sat across from her. "Then let's practice," he said. "Just for now." She shifted, uncomfortable. "I need my mom to be okay." Jonathan nodded. "That's fair. And I need school to stop calling people." "Why?" "Because they don't help," she said. "They just write things down." Jonathan exhaled slowly. "I need people to stop asking me questions I can't answer," Lena continued. "And I need somewhere to sit when it rains." The simplicity of it hurt. Jonathan reached for his phone again. This time, he made a call. "Find me everything you can on Lena Alvarez," he said quietly. "Mother, employment, housing, school records. I want facts, not assumptions." He ended the call and looked back at Lena. "I'm going to talk to your mom," he said. Lena's eyes widened. "Please don't be mad at her." "I'm not," Jonathan replied. "I just need to understand." She studied him closely. "You don't sound like other grown-ups." "How do they sound?" "Like they already decided." Jonathan stood, walked to the window again. "I've decided very few things lately," he said. That's how I know this matters. Lena finished her soup, carefully wiped the bowl clean with a piece of bread. Can I ask you something? She said. Yes. Are you lonely? The question was direct. No softness. No fear. Jonathan didn't answer right away. Yes, he said finally. Lena nodded. I thought so. Why? Because big places echo, she said, and people who live in them usually talk to themselves. Jonathan almost laughed. Almost. His phone buzzed. One message. Mother missed 3 shifts. Eviction notice issued 2 weeks ago. School flag risk, but no follow-up resources assigned. Jonathan closed his eyes. A broken system. Written down. Logged. Left unfinished. He looked at Lena. You're staying here tonight, he said. Her shoulders stiffened. Is that allowed? I'll make it allowed. And tomorrow? Jonathan met her gaze. Tomorrow, he said, we start fixing what shouldn't have been broken in the first place. Lena nodded slowly. Then, for the first time, she leaned back against the couch. Not waiting. Resting. Night came quietly in the apartment. Too quietly. Jonathan realized he didn't know what children did before bed. There were no routines here. No sounds of running water from a shared bathroom. No voices through walls. Just the low hum of the city and the distant whir of machines keeping the building alive. Lena sat cross-legged on the couch, flipping through a magazine she hadn't really been reading. You can sleep in the guest room, Jonathan said. She nodded, then paused. Will you wake me up if I oversleep? Yes. You promise? Jonathan looked at her. Yes. She considered the word like it was fragile, then stood and followed him down the hallway. The guest room was unused. Bed perfectly made. No personal items. No warmth. Lena placed her backpack carefully beside the bed. You can leave it open, Jonathan said. She shook her head. It's safer closed. He didn't argue. When she lay down, she stayed rigid, hands folded on her chest, eyes open. Jonathan hovered near the door. Do you need anything? A light. He turned on the lamp. And water. He brought it. And can you leave the door open? He left it open. As he turned away, her voice stopped him. You won't disappear if I fall asleep, right? Jonathan's chest tightened. No, he said. I'll be right here. She watched him for a long moment, then finally closed her eyes. Jonathan walked back to the living room and stood in the dark, unsure what to do with himself. He had faced hostile takeovers, global collapses, numbers that could break nations. None of that felt as heavy as the quiet weight of an 8-year-old trusting him to stay. His phone rang. He answered immediately. I found her mother, his assistant said. Maria Alvarez. Temporary work, mostly night cleaning. Staying in a car the last few days. Jonathan closed his eyes. Where is she now? Hospital. Exhaustion. Dehydration. They released her this afternoon. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Did anyone call the school? No. Did anyone offer help? No. Silence on the line. Jonathan ended the call and stood still for a long moment. He walked to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of water, didn't drink it. Then he opened his laptop. He reviewed reports. School funding cuts. Housing wait lists. Agencies designed to observe, not intervene. Systems built to notice failure, without stopping it. Around midnight, a soft sound came from a hallway. Jonathan looked up. Lena stood there, half awake, hair loose, backpack hugged her chest. I had a bad dream, she said. Jonathan moved toward her immediately. Do you want to talk about it? She shook her head. It was loud. He knelt to her level. You're safe. She hesitated. Can I sit with you? Yes. She climbed onto the couch, curling into the corner. Jonathan sat at the other end, careful not to crowd her. For a few minutes, neither spoke. Then Lena said, My mom says people help until it costs them something. Jonathan stared straight ahead. She's been proven right too many times. Will you stop helping me when it costs you something? Jonathan turned to her. It already cost me something, he said. That's how I know it matters. She studied his face like she was memorizing it. Okay, she said quietly. Her breathing slowed. She fell asleep sitting upright, backpack still in her arms. Jonathan didn't move. He stayed there until morning light crept through the windows. When his phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls, he ignored them all. For the first time in decades, the billionaire chose to sit still. And somewhere between the quiet and the waiting, the shape of tomorrow began to change. Morning arrived without alarms. Jonathan woke on the couch with a stiff neck and a blanket he didn't remember taking. Lena was still asleep beside him, curled inward, backpack finally loosened enough to slide onto the floor. He didn't move right away. He watched her breathe, not shallow, not rushed, just steady enough to mean rest. Carefully, he stood and walked to the kitchen. He wasn't sure what breakfast should look like for a child, so he made something simple. Toast, eggs, warm milk. When he returned, Lena was sitting up, rubbing her eyes. "You stayed?" she said. "Yes." "You didn't change your mind?" "No." She nodded, like something important had just been confirmed. They ate at the counter. Lena didn't rush this time. "Are we going to school?" she asked. Jonathan paused. "Eventually, but not today." Her shoulders tensed. "Am I in trouble?" "No," he said firmly. "You're not the problem." She studied his face. "People say that, then they still send me back. I'm not sending you anywhere until things are different." "Different how?" "Better." She didn't smile. She waited. Jonathan's phone rang again. "This can't wait," his assistant said. "The board is calling an emergency session." Jonathan looked at Lena. "Put it on speaker," he said. The voices filled the room. Controlled. "Urgent. You missed 2 meetings," someone said. "You pulled funding from 3 projects without notice," another added. Jonathan listened, calm. "There's a temporary hold on all discretionary spending," he said. "Effective immediately." Silence. "You can't do that unilaterally." "I can," Jonathan replied. "And I just did." "Jonathan, this affects thousands of contracts." "Yes," he said. "That's the point." Lena watched him closely. "We'll reconvene later," Jonathan said, and ended the call. She blinked. "Are you in trouble now?" Jonathan smiled faintly. "Probably." "Because of me?" "Because of what I finally noticed." She considered that. "What happened to my mom?" Lena asked. Jonathan's expression softened. "I'm going to see her today." Lena's hands tightened around her glass. "Will she be mad?" "No." "Will she be scared?" Jonathan hesitated. "Maybe, but she won't be alone." They drove later that morning. This time, Lena watched the city with less tension, curiosity replacing vigilance. The hospital was crowded, loud, overworked. Jonathan spoke to staff quietly. Papers moved faster when his name was recognized. Maria Alvarez sat on a plastic chair near the window, shoulders slumped, eyes hollow from lack of sleep. She looked up. Her face changed when she saw Lena. She stood too fast. "Lena." Lena stopped walking. Jonathan slowed, staying behind her. "Mom," Lena said softly. Maria crossed the space and knelt, pulling her daughter into her arms like she might vanish. She cried without sound, shaking. "I'm sorry," she whispered again and again. "I'm so sorry." Lena hugged her back. "I know." Maria looked up at Jonathan, fear flashing through her exhaustion. "Are you?" she started. "I'm Jonathan," he said. "I brought her somewhere safe." Maria's voice broke. "I didn't mean for this to happen." "I know," Jonathan said. "That's why we're here." A social worker hovered nearby, clipboard in hand. "I just need to ask a few questions," she said. Jonathan turned to her. "You'll wait." She blinked. "Excuse me?" "You'll wait," he repeated. "Until this family has had a moment." The woman hesitated, then nodded. Jonathan stepped back, giving them space. Lena held her mother's hand tightly. "We're okay," Lena said. "For now." Maria looked up at Jonathan again, eyes full of shame and gratitude tangled together. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't," Jonathan replied. "You just get better." The 3 of them stood there, fragile and unfinished. And for the first time, the system that had failed him was being forced to pause. Not because it wanted to, but because someone with power had decided to look directly at the damage. They didn't leave the hospital together. Maria needed paperwork, evaluations, questions that took time and gave very little back. Jonathan understood that part of the system well. Delay disguised as care. Lena sat beside her mother, legs swinging, quiet again. Jonathan stood a few steps away, watching how Maria kept touching Lena's arm, her shoulder, like she needed proof she was still there. When the social worker finally returned, her tone was careful. "We'll need to assess housing stability," she said, "and consistent employment." Maria nodded, eyes down. "I'm trying." "I know," the woman said, "but trying isn't always enough." Jonathan stepped forward. "It is when the system stops working against it," he said. Both women looked at him. "I'll arrange temporary housing," Jonathan continued. "Not a shelter. Something stable, close to the school." The social worker stiffened. "Sir, we can't accept outside interference." "You already do," Jonathan said evenly. "You just call it donations and grants when it comes from corporations. This will be no different." Maria's voice shook. "I don't want favors." "This isn't a favor," Jonathan replied. "It's a correction." Lena looked between them. "Does this mean I don't have to wait outside school anymore?" Jonathan crouched to her level. "That's exactly what it means." Her shoulders relaxed just a little. By afternoon, Maria was released officially. They stepped back out into the city, sunlight breaking through clouds like it hadn't decided whether to stay. The car waited. Maria hesitated before getting in. "I don't belong in cars like this." Jonathan opened the door wider. "Right now, you belong with your daughter." That was enough. They drove in silence for a while. "I used to have plans," Maria said suddenly. "I wasn't always like this." Jonathan nodded. "Most people aren't." "I worked 2 jobs," she continued. "Then one cut hours. Then the other closed. Then rent went up. And then everything felt like it was sliding." Lena stared out the window. "People think you fail all at once," Maria said. "But it's really one small thing at a time." Jonathan absorbed that. They arrived at a mid-rise building, clean but modest. Not luxury, not neglect. Somewhere in between. Temporary housing. The paperwork would say. A lifeline, Maria would feel. Inside, the apartment was small but warm. 2 bedrooms. A kitchen that smelled faintly of fresh paint. Lena walked from room to room, quiet. "This is ours," she asked. "For now," Jonathan said, "until we make something permanent." Maria sat on the couch and pressed her hands into her face. She didn't cry. She just breathed. "I don't know how to do this anymore," she said. Jonathan sat across from her. "You don't have to know everything. You just have to keep showing up." Lena leaned against her mother's side. "Mr. Jonathan," she said, "are you going to leave now?" The question wasn't accusatory, just careful. Jonathan looked at both of them. "No," he said, "not yet." Outside, his phone vibrated again. Messages piling up, pressure building. But inside the apartment, something fragile was settling. Maria looked at him. "Why are you doing this?" Jonathan didn't answer right away. "Because I spent years believing distance was the same as safety," he said. "And I was wrong." Lena nodded like that made sense. The afternoon stretched quietly. They unpacked, donated groceries. Jonathan watched Maria move with practiced efficiency, even in exhaustion. This was survival, not laziness. As evening approached, Jonathan stood. "I have to go back tonight," he said, "but I'll come tomorrow." Lena walked him to the door. "You promise?" she asked. "Yes." She held his gaze. "People say that." "I know," Jonathan said. "That's why I won't disappear." She stepped back, satisfied enough. When the door closed behind him, Jonathan leaned against it for a moment. The system hadn't changed yet, but a crack had formed, and through it, something human was finally getting through. The next morning, the city felt different to Jonathan. Not quieter, not kinder, just sharper. He sat in the back seat again, suit pressed, face composed, the version of himself the world recognized. But his mind stayed in the small apartment with peeling paint and 2 people learning how to breathe again. At the office, the boardroom was full. Screens glowed. Faces were tight. "You overstepped," one of them said before Jonathan even sat down. "I acted," Jonathan replied. "You redirected funds without approval." "Yes, for one family." For a pattern, Jonathan corrected. A pause. "This is emotional," another voice said. Jonathan folded his hands. "This is operational failure." They stared at him. "Our foundation donates millions to education," Jonathan continued. "Yet one child waited in the rain because her school couldn't manage a phone call that led to actual help. That's not our scope." "That's exactly our scope," Jonathan said. "We fund systems that document suffering without reducing it." Silence followed. Jonathan stood. "I'm creating a new division," he said. "Direct intervention. Fewer reports. Faster response. That's not how philanthropy works." "It is now." Someone laughed, sharp and disbelieving. "You can't fix society by adopting every problem you see." Jonathan looked at them steadily. "No, but I can stop pretending I don't see them." He left the room before anyone could respond. By afternoon, headlines began to stir. Rumors, whispers, a billionaire pivoting away from profit, a bored and quiet revolt. Jonathan ignored all of it. He returned to the apartment just before sunset. Lena opened the door herself this time. "You came back," she said, not surprised but relieved. "Yes." Maria was cooking. The smell was simple and real. "I made too much," she said nervously. "I didn't know if you'd stay." Jonathan took off his jacket. "Then I'll help you finish it." They ate together at a small table that wobbled slightly. Lena talked about school, about a classmate who shared snacks, about a teacher who noticed when kids were tired but didn't know what to do. "She tries," Lena said. "She just looks sad after." Jonathan listened. After dinner, Lena spread her homework on the table. "Can you help me?" she asked. Jonathan hesitated. "I might be rusty." She smiled faintly. "That's okay. I can show you." They worked slowly, mistakes corrected gently. Maria watched from the counter, something in her eyes easing. Later, when Lena went to brush her teeth, Maria spoke quietly. "You didn't have to come back," she said. "I said I would." "Yes, but people say that when it's easy." Jonathan met her gaze. "It's not easy." She nodded. "That's why it matters." He stayed until Lena was asleep, sprawled across the bed, hair wild, backpack finally hanging on a hook by the door. When Jonathan stood to leave, Lena stirred. "Are you going to fix the school?" she murmured. Jonathan smiled softly. "I'm going to try." She drifted back to sleep. Outside, the city lights flickered on. The system was still broken, but now it had someone paying attention, and that made it nervous. The pressure came faster than Jonathan expected. By the time he reached his office the next morning, 3 interviews had been requested. 2 investors had threatened to pull out, and his assistant looked like she hadn't slept. "They think you've lost focus," she said carefully. Jonathan loosened his tie. "I've gained it." He spent the morning in meetings that circled the same fear. Control slipping, precedent being set, power used unpredictably. At noon, his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. It was Lena's school. Jonathan answered immediately. "She didn't come to class today," the secretary said. Jonathan's stomach tightened. "She was supposed to." "There was an issue," the woman continued. Her file was flagged. "For what?" "Inconsistent guardianship. Housing transition. We're required to review." Jonathan closed his eyes. "I'm on my way," he said. At the apartment, Maria was pacing. "They came by," she said as soon as Jonathan walked in. 2 people. Clipboards. Smiles that didn't reach their eyes. Lena sat at the table, silent, shoulders hunched. "They asked her questions," Maria continued. "Questions she shouldn't have to answer." Jonathan knelt in front of Lena. "Did they scare you?" She nodded. "They said they might have to help us by moving me somewhere else." Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Did they explain how that helps?" She shook her head. Jonathan stood. "This is what I meant," he said quietly to Maria. "Observation without protection." He made a call. "I want legal counsel involved," he said. "Today." By afternoon, the apartment felt crowded. Lawyers, advocates, people who spoke in careful language. Lena retreated to her room. Jonathan followed and sat on the floor outside her door. "I'm here," he said. There was silence. Then, "Am I the problem?" Lena asked through the door. "No," Jonathan replied immediately. "You're the reason the problem is visible." She opened the door just enough to look at him. "They said my mom might lose me." Jonathan kept his voice steady. "That's not happening." "How do you know?" "Because now they're being watched." She considered this. "They don't like that," she said. "No," Jonathan agreed. "They don't." That evening, an agreement was reached, temporary guardianship recognized, housing stability documented, school notified, paperwork caught up to reality, dragged there by force. After everyone left, the apartment felt empty again. Lena sat on the couch, knees pulled up. "You're tired," she said to Jonathan. "Yes." "You're still going to come back tomorrow?" Jonathan met her eyes. "Yes." She nodded. "Okay." Maria watched them both. "I hate that she understands so much," she said quietly. Jonathan answered without looking away from Lena. "I hate that she had to." Later, as he prepared to leave, Lena walked him to the door again. "Are you mad?" she asked. "At the system," he said. "Not at you." She nodded, satisfied. When Jonathan stepped into the hallway, his phone buzzed again. A message from the board. "Emergency vote scheduled. Authority under review." He looked back at the apartment door, at the place where waiting had finally ended, and he knew the next fight wouldn't be quiet. But neither was he anymore. The vote happened without him. Jonathan knew that before the call came. He was standing in the apartment kitchen, sleeves rolled up, fixing a cabinet hinge that had never closed right. Lena sat on the floor, sorting pencils by color. Maria folded laundry at the table. Normal things. Fragile things. His phone vibrated. He didn't answer it right away. He finished tightening the screw, tested the door. It closed cleanly. Then he stepped into the hallway and answered. "They've suspended your executive authority," his assistant said quietly. "Temporary, they claim." Jonathan leaned against the wall. "Meaning?" "Meaning you still own the company. But you can't move money. Can't redirect programs. Can't interfere." Jonathan closed his eyes. "They called it reckless," she continued. "Personal involvement. Conflict of interest." "Did they mention the child?" Jonathan asked. A pause. "Only as a liability." Jonathan ended the call. When he walked back into the room, Lena looked up immediately. "Something bad happened," she said. Jonathan sat down slowly. "Something expected happened. Are you in trouble because of us?" Maria asked. Jonathan shook his head. "I'm in trouble because I stopped pretending not to see." Lena hugged her knees. "Does that mean you can't help anymore?" Jonathan met her eyes. "It means I have to help differently." She studied him, searching for cracks. "You're not leaving," she said. Not a question. "No," Jonathan replied. "I'm not." That night, rain returned. Not heavy, just enough to remind the city of itself. Jonathan stayed longer than usual, helped with homework, read quietly while Lena drew pictures beside him. One drawing caught his attention. It showed 3 stick figures under an awning, rain falling, one figure standing apart. "That's before," Lena said. "And this?" Jonathan asked, pointing to another page. 3 figures inside a small house. A light on. "That's now," she said. Jonathan swallowed. When it was time to leave, Lena hesitated at the door. "They'll try again," she said. "Who?" "The people who take kids," she replied. "They don't like losing." Jonathan crouched to her level. "Neither do I." She nodded once. "Okay." Outside, Jonathan sat in the car longer than necessary. Power was being pulled from him. Titles questioned. Influence challenged. But inside that apartment, a child had stopped waiting in the rain. And for the first time, Jonathan understood something clearly. The system was loud because it was afraid, and fear meant pressure. Pressure meant weakness, and weakness meant change was possible. The knock came early. Too early. Maria was already awake, sitting at the small table with a cup of coffee gone cold. Lena was still asleep, curled on her side, one arm flung over her pillow like she'd finally learned the bed wouldn't disappear. The knock came again. Firm. Official. Maria stood slowly, every part of her body tightening. By the time she opened the door, Jonathan was already in the hallway. "I was coming anyway," he said quietly. Two people stood there. Clean coats. Neutral faces. Clipboards held like shields. "We're here to follow up," one of them said. There had been concerns raised. Jonathan stepped forward slightly, not blocking the doorway, but present. "Raised by whom?" he asked. The woman glanced down at her notes. "By parties withstanding." Jonathan nodded. "So, people with power." The man cleared his throat. "This doesn't need to be adversarial." "It already is," Jonathan replied. "You just don't like that it's visible." They stepped inside. The apartment felt smaller immediately. Maria's hand shook. "Where's the child?" the woman asked. Jonathan didn't answer. He looked toward the bedroom. Lena stood there, awake now, hair messy, eyes sharp. "I'm here," she said. The woman smiled too quickly. "Good morning, Lena." Lena didn't smile back. "You can sit," Maria said softly. Lena sat at the table, back straight. "We just have a few questions," the man said. "Routine." Lena looked at Jonathan. He nodded once. "Okay," she said. "Do you feel safe here?" the woman asked. "Yes." "Do you ever feel afraid your mother can't take care of you?" Lena's jaw tightened. "No." "Do you know who this man is?" the woman asked, gesturing toward Jonathan. "Yes." "Can you tell us?" Lena thought carefully. "He's someone who didn't walk past me when it was raining." Silence filled the room. The man shifted. "That's not really." "It is," Jonathan said calmly. The woman tried again. "Lena, has anyone told you what to say?" Lena shook her head. "No. I practice telling the truth." The clipboard stopped moving. "Lena," the man said gently, "sometimes kids don't understand what's best for them." Lena looked at him. "Sometimes grown-ups don't either." Maria covered her mouth. Jonathan didn't move. The woman closed her folder slowly. "We'll need to escalate this," she said. "Formal review. Temporary placement may be considered." "No," Jonathan said. The word was quiet. "Absolute. You don't get to decide that," the man replied. Jonathan met his eyes. "I already did." He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. "You're on record now," Jonathan continued. "Everything you say, everything you do, every step you take from this point forward will be examined, not by me, but by people who don't like bad optics." The woman stiffened. "Is that a threat?" "It's transparency," Jonathan said. "Something your system struggles with." Lena watched them carefully. The man exhaled. "We'll be in touch." They left without another word. The door closed. Maria slid down into the chair like her legs had given up. Lena didn't move. Jonathan knelt in front of her. "You were brave," he said. She shook her head. "I was honest." "That's harder," Jonathan replied. She nodded, accepting that. Outside, his phone buzzed nonstop. Messages, alerts, articles. Billionaire challenges child welfare oversight. Power clash raises ethical questions. When help becomes interference. Jonathan ignored them all. He looked at the small kitchen, the wobbly table, the child who refused to be spoken over. The system would push harder now, but so would he. And this time, he wasn't standing alone in the rain. The city reacted before the system did. By noon, Jonathan's name was everywhere. Not in full, just enough to spark curiosity. A billionaire, a child, authority questioned, lines drawn. Maria turned off the television when the third segment started. "I don't want Lena to see this," she said. Lena was at the table, coloring carefully. She hadn't looked up once. "They're talking about us," she said anyway. Jonathan sat across from her. They're talking about me. She shook her head. No, they're talking about whether people like me are allowed to stay where they are. Jonathan didn't correct her. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. I need you to listen, his lawyer said. They're building a narrative that you're unstable, that this is personal. Emotional? It is personal, Jonathan replied. That doesn't make it wrong. It makes it dangerous, the lawyer said. They'll argue you're influencing a vulnerable family. Jonathan looked at Lena. I am influencing things. I'm stopping harm. You need distance, the lawyer continued, for your own protection. Jonathan's voice was steady. Distance is what caused this. He ended the call. Outside, a car idled longer than necessary. Someone taking pictures. Someone waiting for a moment. Lena noticed. Are they going to take my picture? She asked. Jonathan stood and closed the curtains. No one is coming in here. Maria's voice trembled. This is my fault. No, Jonathan said firmly. This is what happens when broken systems are exposed. Lena set her crayon down. If I go somewhere else, will this stop? The room went very quiet. Jonathan moved to her side immediately. That's not your choice to make. But it would be easier, she said. People stop being mad when you give them what they want. Jonathan felt something cold pass through him. Lena, he said carefully, do you know why people like that get power? She shook her head. Because they convince others that sacrifice is noble when it's forced, Jonathan said. And that silence is safety. Lena absorbed that. I don't want to be noble, she said. I just want to stay. Maria reached for her daughter's hand. And you will, Jonathan said, not because I'm powerful, but because you're right. That afternoon, a letter arrived. Official, heavy paper. Notice of formal review. Timeline uncertain. Maria's hands shook as she read it. They can do this for months, she whispered. Jonathan nodded. That's how pressure works. What do they wear us down? Jonathan looked at Lena. Then we don't stand alone. He made another call. This one was different. I want to go public, he said. A pause. With everything, he continued. The funding gaps, the delays, the cases that never resolve. The voice on the other end grew cautious. That will burn bridges. Jonathan looked at the child drawing at the table. Still careful, still quiet. Good, he said. They were built over people. When he hung up, Lena looked at him. Are you scared? She asked. Yes. Jonathan answered honestly. She nodded. Me too. They sat together in the small apartment. The noise outside pressing in. Fear didn't leave, but it stopped being lonely. And that changed everything. The press conference was held in a room too bright to feel safe. White walls, clear podium, rows of chairs filled with people who had decided what they wanted before hearing anything. Jonathan stood alone at the front. No branding, no logos, no prepared slides. Just facts. He spoke slowly. Systems fail quietly, he said. They don't collapse. They erode. And the people caught inside them learn to shrink. Cameras clicked. I didn't intervene because I'm generous, Jonathan continued. I intervened because I was late, because I walked past too many times before. A reporter raised a hand. Are you saying the child welfare system is corrupt? Jonathan met her gaze. I'm saying it's comfortable with delay, and delay hurts children. Another voice cut in. Isn't this just guilt? Jonathan nodded once. Yes, and responsibility. Guilt notices. Responsibility stays. Questions came fast. Power, motive, control. Jonathan answered none of them directly. He told stories instead. Not names, not faces. Patterns. Children waiting. Parents exhausted. Schools documenting pain. Agencies escalating instead of stabilizing. This isn't about one child, Jonathan said. It's about how many learn to stop asking for help. The conference ended without applause. That night, the apartment was quiet. Maria sat on the couch, watching Lena sleep through the open bedroom door. She hasn't slept like that in years, Maria whispered. Jonathan leaned against the wall. Neither have I. The fallout came quickly. Emails from donors pulling back. Calls from allies going silent. But something else happened too. Messages arrived. Quiet ones. Teachers. Caseworkers. Parents. Stories that sounded the same with different details. I saw this happen. I tried to stop it. Thank you for saying it out loud. Lena woke near midnight and padded into the living room. Did you talk to everyone? She asked. Yes. Did they listen? Jonathan thought carefully. Some did. Some didn't want to. That's okay, Lena said. You only need a few. Maria smiled faintly. Where did you learn that? Lena shrugged. From watching people leave. Jonathan felt that familiar ache. The next morning, a notice came. Review suspended pending public inquiry. Temporary protections upheld. Maria sat down hard when she read it. Does this mean? She started. It means time, Jonathan said, and time is breathing room. Lena looked up. So I don't have to pack? No, Jonathan replied. You don't. She nodded, then went back to her drawing like this was simply how things worked. Jonathan watched her. The system hadn't fixed itself, but it had paused. And pauses, he was learning, were where change started. Time changed the apartment. Not suddenly. Quietly. Shoes appeared by the door and stayed there. Drawings multiplied on the refrigerator. The table stopped wobbling after Jonathan fixed it one evening without making a big deal of it. Lena started sleeping through the night. That was how Maria noticed first. She doesn't wake up crying anymore, Maria said one morning, almost afraid to say it out loud. Jonathan nodded. Neither do I. School meetings followed. Different tone now. Softer. Careful. Teachers spoke about support instead of risk. About stability instead of compliance. Lena sat beside Jonathan during one meeting, swinging her legs. Do you have any concerns? The counselor asked her. Lena thought for a moment. I don't like loud voices. And I don't like when people talk about me like I'm not there. The counselor flushed. That's fair. Jonathan didn't smile. He just remembered. Outside the room, Maria whispered, She sounds so sure. She is, Jonathan replied. Someone finally listened. The public inquiry moved slowly. Too slowly. But it moved. Files were opened. Timelines questioned. Funding paths traced. People who had never been named before suddenly were. Jonathan stayed visible but quiet. He stopped trying to control outcomes and focused on presence. He drove Lena to school when Maria worked early shifts. He learned which snacks she liked, which days math fell harder. One afternoon, Lena asked, Are you my dad now? The question was gentle, curious. Jonathan stopped the car. I'm someone who stays, he said carefully. If that's what you mean. She thought about it. Okay. That was enough. Maria watched this happen with mixed emotion. You don't have to do all of this, she said one night. I know, Jonathan replied. Why keep choosing it? Jonathan looked down the hallway where Lena slept, door open, light on. Because choosing it is the only thing that makes sense now. A letter arrived weeks later. Permanent housing approval. School stability plan confirmed. Case closed. Maria cried into the paper. Lena didn't celebrate. She just asked, So this is real? Yes, Jonathan said. She nodded. Okay. That night, Lena taped a new drawing to fridge. 3 figures. Same house. No rain this time. A sun in the corner. Jonathan stood in the kitchen long after everyone else went to bed. The system hadn't healed. But one child had stopped waiting, and that he knew now was never small.